Tipp FM investigates. Funded by the News Reporting Scheme. Disability in Tipperary.
Rachel Broderick is a mother based in Thurles who joined the Happy New Year movement after her oldest child Sarah was diagnosed with profound deafness. The organisation is a community-led organisation formed by parents of deaf and hard of hearing children. Rachel's time working with the movement not only changed her own life but the life of many children living in Tipperary and all over Ireland. Rachel, could you tell us what led you to what was then known as the Happy New Year and now known as Our New Year organisation?
I had Sarah, typical normal pregnancy. We thought that Sarah might have a hearing difficulty or be deaf when she was about 12 months old. It took about 2 years to get conclusive diagnosis. We were in the time where there was a lot of audiology struggles in Ireland. There was significant struggles in audiology in Ireland in general. When Sarah was diagnosed, we eventually went forward for a cochlear implant. She got one, as was the norm in Ireland. Happy New Year launched a campaign to look for two for every child because there's a significant improvement in quality of life and success rates when you have two. That was successful. It was gone past the time for Sarah, but I actually had another child who was also deaf at this point. So Daniel had 2 implants, and when Sarah turned 9, they actually had gotten through the backlog and gave every child 2 implants.
At the time of Sarah's diagnosis, was there sufficient support in Tipperary?
We've had quite a lot of support, Tipp, in fairness, from our side of things. We were getting no speech and language therapy, but we reached out to Michael Lowry at the time, and Sarah was given speech and language therapy every 2 weeks for 2 years, which made a big difference. It was detrimental if we didn't get this therapy. She wouldn't have, progression of normal speech patterns. So it was really, really impactful because you can't catch back up. You can't revert back to the age where someone's malleable and capable of getting the level of speech that Sarah has. Our New Year's then we formed, and we attended all the peer-to-peer support, and we just done various therapies, but it was all kind of community-led.
And why were there such little supports available?
There is no local services even. We're in Templemore now, but at the time we were in Thurles, there is very, very little staffing for speech and language therapy across Ireland, but Tipperary is quite a large county, and we've incredibly few resources in that sense. St Mary's Clinic in Thurles had someone I think they used to visit once every 2 months. But if you consider the amount of children that go into any school at 5, all the little baby infants going in, like think of the level of children that require speech and language on average. For one person to visit every 2 months is really difficult, and not everyone can travel. Clonmel has a couple of resources, but that's it. You've got Nina, Clonmel, or Thurles, and they're all intermittent. They're moving around catchments, and they're going and doing one day here, and then a couple of months later they'll do another day.
Since Sarah has been born, have you noticed progression across the county?
Progress has been made, but I don't suppose it's come mostly from speech and language services or anything like that. But the fact that inclusion has become much more topical and much more prevalent in society in general, if you think about the likes of AI and the technology that we've access to now, I mean, Sarah's level of captioning services is much better, so she can access education better. She can also improve her literacy. She can improve her understanding of speech through reading it and hearing it at the same time. So these are things that kind of build up your muscle when it comes to understanding language.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Happy New Year cochlear implant movement?
So in the UK, and we usually do follow the UK, Ireland, they had provisioned that every child would get 2, but in Ireland we were still doing 1. International studies and kind of basically just about any kind of doctor was preaching how much more value you could have if a child had 2 ears. You'd have more sound localization, you'd have stronger ability to build up your auditory memory. There was kind of loads of different things like spatial awareness. All of this comes in with having 2 cochlear implants. And you have to remember that when you get 1 cochlear implant, that isn't just one perfect ear. It's still you still have a mild to moderate hearing loss with a cochlear implant, and you still have limited functionality on hearing. So we weren't saying like, they have 1 ear, sure, they're fine now, they can hear. The case is that they don't have it. So if we can give it in 2 ears, at least that we're giving something. There's a parity there, and it's bringing up the base level. Also, there was a recall in cochlear implants back then. Some of them had to be recalled because there was a faulty node inside them. So children, they take out the implant and they've nothing else. We engaged with the oroptist. We also had engaged with Cochlear, the company who manufactured them directly, and kind of gone through how cheaply they could do it. They announced that on the budget, and we were actually there on the day that they announced it in the budget.
How did being part of the Happy New Year movement impact your family, and was it a good source of support for you?
It was fantastic for me. I don't know how I would have done it without these ladies. I still meet these women regularly. We all kind of came together because we all had the same idea that, look, we don't want to be thinking in 10 years' time. I wish someone had done something 10 years ago because it would all be well now. Sarah was diagnosed and I had no one, whereas I was in this movement when Daniel was diagnosed. So, like, the difference in being able to talk to people about, I'm going in here, what you think's going to happen, talking it through. Like, all of that community was around me. Everyone knew, everyone was kind of giving me advice, and the language. And audiology, while it's not invasive, it's not comfortable either. It's a difficult appointment, especially for young children and getting hearing aid moles, and it's hitting the eardrum and they're getting upset. And I just had all of these people around me who were willing to kind of share tips and tricks.
Were there services that really helped you and Sarah?
Well, I have to say there is Chime, which is the National Association for Deaf. They kind of work in Tipperary in the sense that they will fit out the school and they'll send someone down to fit out the school with all the equipment you need. So, like, there's a sound field system, which is like little speakers, the teacher wears a mic. You can progress on to having an FM system, which is the teacher wears a mic around their neck and it goes directly into Sarah's implants. So all of that was kind of provided directly into our school in Tipperary. Sarah was in the presentation at the time. So that was great services to be getting into. Like, speech and language was something that we didn't really get. We got a little bit of occupational therapy. That was brilliant. We were delighted. Luckily enough, there's quite good occupational therapy accessibility in Turles itself in the nursing home.
Why was there no speech and language support available?
There was no therapists. The waiting list is too high. I believe that hasn't come down. I mean, I still get calls from newly diagnosed parents to see what it's going to be like in the future for them. But the lists have not gotten less. Like, the government are not investing in that area. We have these wonderful nurses and medical people graduating in Ireland, and they're generally immigrating. They're not staying.
And Sarah, what were some challenges you faced in the earlier years of your diagnosis?
I wouldn't be able to be in larger groups because I'm with my SNA trying to learn how to speak and like hear properly. So I remember being taken out to do extra reading,
What were some supports that helped you or maybe still help you?
like the FM for school, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's my favorite tool ever. I can hear the teachers really clearly, and even in a loud classroom, I'm still getting information.
What are some challenges you're still facing or people your age may be facing?
If they're doing the leaving cert or like the junior cert, I find if you're doing Irish or German, the listening is very difficult. They don't give you any like additional learning material to practice your listenings. They kind of give you one or two previous years, and I found that very difficult personally.
Do you feel this adds more pressure while you prepare for your leaving cert?
Definitely, especially in English. Like, I love English. It's like it takes 5 minutes for me to actually come up with the correct word that I want, but I have it in my head.
Yeah, like, auditory memory it's categorically connected with being deaf. It's just not as strong in someone who is deaf.
Who can support you with this issue?
Currently, I only have support from like my counselor, guidance counselor, and like my German teacher. He checks everything for my disability.
Do you think schools in Tipperary are aware of these issues?
I wouldn't say so. My German teacher was shocked that we didn't have enough like practice material. I had 3 years only.
What advice would you both have, or are there any organisations in Tipperary you think people should be aware of?
There's a lot more services than you think there are. The youth groups, and a lot of them are organic in Tipperary, fantastic and such a resource. A lot of non-state provided resources, but they are there. And I'd say an awful lot of that advice will come correctly from a local kind of school.
There's a youth group here in Templemore. It's quite a lovely youth group. Like, it's really to help young people connect with other people and also get like real life experience as well. I got to meet loads of lovely people as well. Advice I'd give is just keep trying. Like, my dad would always tell me about like how he'd hear me in my bedroom at nighttime as a child, practicing words I heard that day to try perfect my speech.
Although Rachel and Sarah have made lifelong connections through the Our New Ears organisation, they've taken a step back since Rachel's children are slightly older. However, the organisation continues to carry out important work. Laura Keating is now involved. And Laura, could you tell us what are some gaps that Our New Ear are still focusing on?
There's massive gaps with regards to the provision of, Irish Sign Language for people to access services, to access medical services, educational services, from primary right up through secondary school, and also therapeutic services. So the speech and language services that deaf and hard of hearing children will be offered, they're very much tailored towards hearing children and hearing young people, unless you have a therapist that is trained in dealing with a child or a young person with a hearing loss. We have fantastic speech and language therapists who work out of, the Hearing Implant Centre in Beaumont Hospital, but they only obviously service children and young people who have cochlear implants. Most people with a hearing loss would use hearing aids. So there's a massive, massive gap. So we have about 70 to 75 babies who are identified through the newborn screening, but we have 4,500 children and young people who are currently in full-time education. The numbers are I would feel, low in that service. In other countries, you might have teachers of the deaf, as they're called, with maybe 30, 40, 50 kids in their caseload. In Ireland, we have over 200 per teacher of the deaf. That alone speaks volumes about the type of service that is currently being offered by the NCSE. It just doesn't match up. Tipperary's a big county, and you might have one teacher who has to travel the length and breadth of the area to visit the children and the young people in their area. That's certainly something that we continue to lobby for with the government, with the NCSE, for education and young people, and to really keep the needs of deaf and hard of hearing people to the forefront of their mind. The educational outcomes of this group of students, that's not examined in any great detail. The NCSE published a paper, it's well over, I'd say 12 years ago now at this stage, that, their mission was that, deaf and hard of hearing students would have, their educational outcomes will be on a par with their hearing peers. And that's almost a direct quote from their paper. But they've never measured it. So if we don't know what we haven't measured. So we don't know where really the massive gaps could be. Pessimistic, and they're historic now at this stage with regard to educational outcomes. Reading ages of deaf and hard of hearing kids and historically have been quite low. We see fantastic, both academic and, sporting and social achievements by deaf and hard of hearing people. But without the fundamental supports, from primary school right up into secondary school and third level, of course, do people really reach their potential? And that's something that we as a group, as Our New Ears, will continue to ask of our public representatives. We'll ask it of the NCSE, of the Department of Education, the civil servants. We'll continue to push that because it's really, really, really important. Language is a basic human right, education is a basic human right, and we just can't have that ignored.
Following on from the cochlear implant movement, what are some successful moments that Our New Ears have been part of?
We identified that there was a specialist speech and language therapy. It's called auditory verbal therapy. That's a play-based therapy specifically targeted towards deaf and hard of hearing children who wish to access, sound and develop spoken language ultimately. So some really generous parents allowed us to sit in on their therapy sessions with their children. When we saw this therapy in action, we said, we really need to have this in Ireland. Now, there was nobody here that could provide that service. And we were delighted to receive funding, which we applied for. We got a group of speech and language therapists to come and sit in a room and learn the basics. And over time, we kept fundraising, we kept lobbying, and now we have 4 fully qualified auditory verbal therapists in Ireland.
What advice would you have for any parents who are maybe thinking of joining or would like some support?
Well, I think for us, it's been really empowering. I think one of the biggest changes when you become part of a community is that it can help you to stop feeling alone and isolated. There's nearly 1,000 members in the Our New Ears group. So that alone speaks volumes, that there's a power in numbers. And particularly like when your child meets other deaf children or other children who use hearing technology, and when parents meet families further along their journey, it just changes everything. It just gives you hope. It gives you a sense of, I suppose, high expectations, really. And I think it just gives confidence, a sense of belonging, reassurance. And for me, it helped shift my focus from fear just to possibility.
Thank you to Laura, Rachel and Sarah for talking to us today. For anyone looking for support, do reach out to Our New Ears.
Tipp FM investigates. Funded by the News Reporting Scheme. Disability in Tipperary.